you've put your full team out, isn't it? Full squad available, is that right? Just having a quick glance at it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're at full strength. Obviously, it's a very exciting year on lots of fronts for England cricket. And one of the things we're building towards is the T20 World Cup. And obviously, this is a great opportunity, playing in India for these 5 T20s, to put out a really strong squad for that. So we're really excited about the opportunity to build towards that T20 World Cup.
Does it show any, I don't know, sort of preference towards, people might say T20 rather than Test cricket, and that you've managed to put the full squad out for the T20s, and yet people are being rested for the Test series, which is now...
No, not at all. I think what we're doing is, we started doing this obviously in 2018, in spring, summer then, when we've looked to take player management very, very seriously. And it's something we've looked into, and we work very closely with the individual players and also as a group. And in that period, all 3 formats, if you discount a couple of draws and a few no results, all 3 formats, we're winning about 70% of completed matches: Tests, ODIs, and T20. So it's an extraordinary thing to be winning across those 3 formats to such a high degree. And as it stands at the moment, we're at the top of the Test World Championship in terms of points. We're number 1 ranked in ODIs and T20s. So I think at the heart of that is player management. I think we're looking for 4 things. We need to look after those players and make sure they're peaking for when we really need them most. We need a larger group of players, so we're not just relying on the same guys over and over again, and then they're at risk of physical and mental problems. And also we look within that at rest and rotation, so we are able to have a continually good 11 on the field at all times in all formats. And the 4th thing is Aggers, which is absolutely central, is we want playing 11s in all formats that can win all around the world, not just in home conditions, but everywhere. And we believe that we can do that. And the results we've been getting over a 2.5-year period show that player management, I think, is an area where you can gain a real edge in elite sport today.
Yeah, I mean, looking at this, do we assume that there'll be some resting for the 50 overs that follow then?
That's a fair assumption. No decisions have been made at this point. I would say that the ODI group will likely be drawn from a similar group of players, and will assess during the T20 tour how people are physically and mentally. Because one of the things that's being slightly underestimated, I think, is that we're also factoring in the difficulties of being in a behind closed doors bubble environment for England all the way through. So this block of cricket after Christmas is obviously pretty much exactly 3 months: January, February, March. And we're being consistent with what we've said to all the multi-format players, which is that no one will be asked to play all the way through in that behind closed doors environment or in a bubble environment, January, February, March. And we've honoured that promise to the players, and we'll continue to be absolutely direct and open with the players about our expectations that they will get rest when they need it.
Yeah, I was going to ask you one about the resting and rotation, and that is obviously Jos Buttler. I mean, the fact that he played so well, and not just that, but you're going to need such a strong team spirit and the management of the players and so on in the difficult circumstances. But I just wonder how he felt leaving, and whether there was any question in anybody's minds, including his, incidentally, about whether or not he would just rather stay.
Look, we worked really closely with Jos on his schedule, and it was very much working together for the good of England cricket. And everyone felt that was the right thing to do. So no, there was no thoughts of a last minute U-turn. I think I agree with the first part of your question, Jonathan, that obviously Jos has been integral to England's success across those formats. And obviously those great performances I mentioned, it's no coincidence that Jos coming back into Test cricket, he's brought a lot to that Test team for all the reasons you mentioned yourself. But player welfare is absolutely critical. And we believe that a large group of players capable of performing at a high level in all conditions across formats is the best approach, and we're very confident in that approach.
Ed, can you clarify for us Joe's position this time round, just because of the player management that you've talked about? Is Joe Root missing this squad because his workload needs managed, or is he not in this sort of 16-man T20 squad still, as you see it?
So nothing's changed with the position with Joe Root. So first of all, I think we're seeing at the moment that Joe is one of England's greatest ever cricketers. I think that's becoming clearer by the day, by the match. Joe's sequence of batting in Test cricket is the best sequence of batting I've ever seen from an England batsman. He's been absolutely remarkable. And I think we can all see that and celebrate that. And we all recognise, everyone involved in England cricket, how fortunate we are to have a person of a quality as a player and as a man that we do in Joe Root. That said, Joe has an incredibly busy year coming up. One of the biggest years of his career. There'll be many other big years too, because he's got so much left in the tank for England. And it's also the case that England have won 7 out of 8 T20 series, with the 8th being a draw. The last 8 T20 series, England have won 7 with 1 drawn. That also coincided in summer 2018 with moving towards a very aggressive batting order. Jos Buttler went to the top of the order, Johnny Bairstow went up the order, and England became, at that point, over that period of time, and have been throughout that period of time, the best batting team in the world, statistically, the world's leading batting team. So that's what's happening in T20s, where we're number 1 ranked in the world. And obviously we can all see what's happening in Tests, where Joe is playing at a level that I've never seen an England a batsman play at. We believe for the time being, that's a good arrangement. It's also the case, and this has been communicated clearly to Joe, and also in this context too, and I can't improve on what Joe said at the end of last summer, when I thought he gave the most extraordinarily perceptive interview about this, where he said, I'd love to play in the T20 World Cup, and he always wants to play for England, and he always wants to help England win matches. But he also knows that he has a lot of demands on his energy and his resources in Test cricket, where of course he's the leader and so absolutely central to our success. And he also knows that if it turns out that he doesn't play in that T20 World Cup and no decisions have been made, he could easily come back in, that it shows how strong a position England cricket is in. I think that's pretty much exactly what Joe said, and I can't improve on it today.
Cool. And looking at Liam Livingston getting the call, he obviously had quite an impressive showing in the Big Bash. Just wondered, was James Vince also in your thoughts? Did it ultimately? Did you feel like you maybe had one spot for Liam Livingston or James Vince and maybe Liam?
To be honest with you, that we see them in slightly different roles. It's certainly true that James had a very good Big Bash, and that was noted. And of course, everything's discussed. We're across every franchise tournament and every cricket match that's played in the world. In this particular instance, Liam brings some other things too, with his bowling, and in terms of getting into squads for major tournaments where space is naturally very limited with that 15 available players, sometimes having those extra strings to your bow is a route into the squad. So it's an exciting time for Liam. He had a really good Big Bash. He's a dynamic cricketer, good fielder, bowler, exciting batsman, and it's a great opportunity for him.
The team has been incredibly good. ECB has been incredibly good on the sort of the mental well-being of players and all the rest of it. I mean, it does seem a little bit different to, if you can accept that Alex made mistakes a few years ago, it does seem, borderline vindictive to keep punishing him for the same mistakes 3 years down the line or 2 years down the line. Is that?
Yeah, it's coming up for 2 years this summer. I think I mentioned, I'll stand by what I said a second ago. I think, in the summer, we'll look at, inviting some people who might come into training in the run-up to series, and as we look to always extend and expand our squad and group of players and the relationships within them. So I think in terms of welfare, the beginning of your question, I think that is central to our philosophy with regard to managing our fixture list at the moment. I think we've got a series of interwoven challenges, which are very interesting. One is the amount of cricket we have to play. The second is the difficulty of moving people around the world due to protocols and restrictions on travel. And the third is, we know that living in this environment where people are pretty much restricted to the hotel room, perhaps to a team restaurant, and then to a cricket ground, we know that that can be very draining for people and is difficult to sustain for a very long period of time unbroken, such as, as I mentioned earlier on, 3 months. We did not think was a fair ask to ask anyone to stay in that environment for 3 months unbroken without seeing family or anyone outside the group. So you're absolutely right that we're totally committed to player well-being.
I mean, the cricketing merits of the IPL are pretty well established at the moment. It's done a lot for players' games individually and for the team as well. We saw that in the World Cup. But I'm just wondering have we reached the point now where the IPL is just a non-negotiable for the players, and that therefore as selectors you just have to block out those periods of time for players and their workloads, and therefore it is England matches that are making way here? Or do you have the power to actually ask players to not play a full IPL or put themselves up for auction?
I think what's being missed here, Ali, is that when we looked at this block of time, the first thing we looked at was January, February and March. I think, in many respects, what you say is true, that the IPL is a part of the cricketing landscape. But just look at January, February, March. We believe that taking that as a piece, that required considerable management with relation to player well-being and indeed performing really strongly across that period of time. And I just go back to what I was mentioning earlier on, Ali, which is that larger group of players who are well mentally and physically, players who are conditioned, players who are ready to come in and play well for England, players who can come into a team and strengthen it by having the energy and that desire to make an instant impact, which we're seeing with people who are coming into the team with relatively little cricket or no cricket behind them. That's the philosophy which is underpinning this. And the decisions we've made with relation to the cricket in the post-Christmas block, it would have been very challenging just to handle those 3 months, given all the things I've mentioned earlier on about how players have to live in the current COVID environment, the amount of cricket they have to play. I think what we're seeing from the players is a remarkable commitment to turning up, to being absolutely ready to go. We saw that with Ben Stokes and the guys that came in for this first test in India. But crucially, we're also seeing it with people as they go out and get their bit of break, a bit of rest. So one of the things that the good bowling teams often talk about is, keeping that pressure on and passing the baton onto the bowler at the other end so that the pressure stays on the opposition. I think what we're seeing now and what we're evolving in the England player group is that sense of finish your period of playing time really, really strongly and leave it in a really good place. And then you go and get your bit of a break and a bit of family time if you're a multi-format player in particular, and the next guy comes in. And the players have been exceptional at that. I think we saw someone like Mark Wood, the efforts he put in those 2 tests physically in Sri Lanka in very draining conditions. And we saw it on Jos's face, how absolutely determined he was to get that win. And then, the big smile, and then he knows that he's left things in a good place and a good cricketer's coming in to take the next chapter forward. So that's what we're trying to get to. And I think the results are showing that the players are really buying in, and England cricket is benefiting from that policy.
Thanks. And just a quick follow-up. Eoin Morgan sort of suggested in when we're in South Africa that this India T20 series was the time when he was getting his full strength side, obviously with conditions relevant to the tournament later in the year. Is that your understanding, i.e. this is the one block of T20 cricket before that tournament where Eoin gets his first choice side, and perhaps later in the summer it might be a bit more chopping and changing because of the test team's demands?
That is correct. This is a very strong T20 side, and clearly it's a great opportunity playing in India with what's coming up later in the year. So yes, that is correct. It's also true, which has sometimes been missed, that there were long periods of last summer when Eoin did not have access to his strongest team. So what's happened is that there have been periods of time where we've had to shuffle and manage resources, and crucially, we've managed to stay performing at that very, very high level where we're winning over 70% of completed matches, which end in a victory or a defeat. So that is an extraordinary level of achievement for a sports team across 3 formats simultaneously. And yes, you're absolutely right. This is something that we have an opportunity to take a really strong T20 team for this series in India, and of course build for a very exciting World Cup in the autumn.
John Etheridge, please.
Ed, sorry, my audio just went down when you were talking about Alex Hales. Just to clarify, did you say that you might consider inviting him along to a 2020 training session in the summer?
That's something we might consider. We might consider it with people who are, good cricketers just outside the actual squad at the moment. Something we do from time to time if it fits, and something where there's an opportunity to sort of just keep growing and expanding that group of players, and keep building those relationships with players who are just outside the actual squad, but we know they're good cricketers. So that's something we might consider in the English summer.
Does that suggest a bit of a softening from Eoin Morgan?
I don't know. I wouldn't, I think just exactly what I just said. I think it's just something we might consider moving forward. It's the kind of thing we do from time to time, and we're open to doing that in the English summer.
Yeah, and just one other thing. We understand there's 1 or 2 niggles with regard to the test match on Friday. Could you shed any light on that?
Sure. I wouldn't get involved with final 11 test match selection in this context, John. All I would say, obviously, is that it was a fantastic victory in the first test. A huge credit to the players, the way they've turned up, their commitment to training before they got out here for those who joined the squad, and also the collective effort and energy in that test match was extraordinary. We'll look at the pitch, assess all the players, as we always do, and make an informed decision before final selection.
Please right to say there are 1 or 2 slight fitness concerns.
Sorry, I wouldn't confirm or deny that, John. I'd just say we go through our usual process, which is we look at the pitch and we take a last-minute full and thorough medical assessment of everyone to make the best decision we can. Same process as always.